All right, let's just jump right into this. We're going to uncover the high stakes, incredibly hidden history of the machine you are quite literally using right now. You might be watching this explainer on a smartphone, a tablet, maybe a sleek laptop, and it probably feels like the ultimate tool for peaceful, everyday civilian life. But the origins of the computer, they're actually deeply, deeply connected to war. Way before these devices became our hubs for entertainment, business, and connection, they were forged as highly classified weapons. Seriously, think about the stark contrast here. On one hand, you've got the mundane, incredibly useful tools we rely on every single day: spreadsheets, web browsers, your smartphone. But on the flip side, artillery calculations, code breaking, and military navigation. Engineers didn't invent the computer so we could shop online, right? They were handed problems that had literally never existed at such a massive scale. They were locked in a desperate life-or-death race for information. And those peaceful tools we enjoy today, they are the direct descendants of those military survival tools.
Section 1. Born from War, from abstract math to national survival.
So let's start at the beginning, back when abstract mathematics suddenly shifted from a theoretical curiosity into a matter of absolute national survival. In the 1930s, way before anyone had a physical PC sitting on their desk, mathematicians were pondering the very nature of computation itself. And in 1936, a brilliant mathematician named Alan Turing established a profound idea. I mean, imagine telling an engineer in 1936 that a machine's true power wasn't in its physical gears, but in invisible instructions. It was totally revolutionary. He described a theoretical machine, not made of wires and metal, just a concept, that was capable of manipulating symbols according to a strict set of instructions. It basically proved that a single machine could, in theory, perform many different kinds of calculations if it just followed systematic rules. But then World War II began, and suddenly, engineers were faced with absolutely impossible problems that demanded immense, immediate information. Modern warfare was rapidly becoming dependent on just vast amounts of data. Artillery units required incredibly precise trajectory calculations just to hit their targets. Aircraft and ships needed flawless military navigation to survive long journeys. Radar systems were suddenly generating these immense, overwhelming quantities of data. And above all else, military communications were protected by increasingly sophisticated encryption codes. So the problem was crystal clear. How could a machine perform these absolutely critical calculations faster than an entire room full of human operators who, let's be honest, were slow and prone to error? Well, this intense pressure triggered a furious race to build massive, top-secret machines. Over in Britain, teams at Bletchley Park, including Alan Turing, furiously attacked the German Enigma machine. This led to Tommy Flowers designing Colossus, a machine that used electronic components to process encrypted signals at unbelievable speeds. Meanwhile, in the United States, the University of Pennsylvania was building ENIAC specifically to crunch artillery trajectory calculations. And these early machines were absolutely enormous. I mean, they took up entire rooms, they were highly classified, and they consumed huge amounts of electricity. They weren't intelligent in the way we think of today. They simply executed mathematical operations at extraordinary speed to break codes and calculate ballistics. Section 2. The shrinking machine. Engineering the future. Now, machines like ENIAC had a major weakness. Programming them was a literal physical nightmare. Operators had to manually plug and unplug cables and flip hundreds of physical switches just to change the machine's instructions. If you had a new math problem, you basically had to physically rebuild the circuit. So engineers had to ask themselves a crucial question to get past the limitations of these clunky behemoths. What if instructions could be stored inside the machine itself? The answer was a monumental leap forward, which we now call the stored program concept. Instead of physically rewiring the machine every single time the task changed, a computer could just store its instructions directly in its memory and execute them electronically. This made computers dramatically more flexible. You were no longer constrained by the hardware's physical layout for every new task. You could finally change the software without touching the hardware. Still, there was a major physical bottleneck. Early machines relied on thousands of incredibly fragile glass vacuum tubes, and these things generated massive amounts of heat, consumed tremendous power, and honestly, they failed constantly. The computer desperately needed a better building block, and that brings us to 1947, when researchers Bardeen, Bratton, and Shockley at Bell Labs demonstrated the transistor. This tiny component had enormous consequences. It performed the exact same function as a vacuum tube, but it was incredibly small, highly reliable, used barely any power, and, crucially, it was scalable. The Cold War accelerated this evolution at a blistering pace. We went from Turing's mere theories in the 30s to giant physical machines in the 40s, right to the revolutionary tiny transistor in 1947. Because as the United States and the Soviet Union competed for military superiority, computers became absolutely vital strategic infrastructure for radar, missiles, and cryptography. The stakes were astronomical, constantly pushing engineers to pack more processing power onto single integrated circuits, ultimately leading to 1971 when Intel introduced the 4004 microprocessor. But a really crucial point nestled right inside that timeline is the year 1961. This was the year President Kennedy made the bold commitment to land a human on the moon. Sending a spacecraft to the moon required guidance, navigation, and control, all operating flawlessly in the dead vacuum of space. In this birthed the Apollo guidance computer. Now, by today's standards, the Apollo guidance computer had less processing power than the microchip inside a musical greeting card. But it proved something vital. Computers could be made small enough and reliable enough to operate in space.
Section 3. Escaping the laboratory, from government secrets to global consumerism.
Thanks to the invention of the microprocessor, the economics of computing changed entirely, and the technology underwent a great shrinking. These machines went from occupying entire top-secret government rooms to sitting on a desk in an office to rusting on your lap and finally fitting neatly inside your pocket as a smartphone. The technology moved completely out of top-secret government laboratories and directly into the hands of the global public.
And as the hardware shrank, its reach just exploded. Soon, computers became interconnected. The internet expanded rapidly. The World Wide Web unlocked human knowledge for ordinary people. Smartphones turned these calculators into global communication devices. And cloud computing moved immense processing power right into massive data centers. It's an incredible pattern in technological history when you step back and think about it. Foundational technologies built by government research for war suddenly powered our social media, streaming services, online banking, and global commerce.
But it is so vital to remember that this wasn't just one single aha moment from a lone genius. It required a massive convergence of disciplines. Mathematics colliding with material science, manufacturing merging with networking, and relentless breakthroughs in semiconductors. The computer emerged from a massive chain of interconnected discoveries. One invention made another possible, which then created demand for the next breakthrough. It literally required decades of intense pressure, massive funding, relentless competition, and millions of hours of engineering to get from a room full of glass vacuum tubes to that sleek phone in your hand.
Section 4. The New Arms Race. AI and the Future of Computation.
Today, those original war-driven problems like calculating artillery arcs and breaking naval codes, they've faded from our everyday lives. But a brand new technological arms race is unfolding right now. Artificial intelligence is driving a massive new demand, pushing the need for raw computing power to unprecedented, frankly mind-boggling levels. We are seeing a massive surge for specialized processors, the construction of absolutely enormous data centers, and companies, even entire nations, spending billions upon billions to secure computing capacity and compete for semiconductor leadership. Which brings us to a really profound realization. The battlefield has moved. The technology has evolved, but the fundamental competition, it remains exactly the same. More than 80 years after the first codebreakers started this incredible journey at Bletchley Park, the core principle remains intact. Whoever can process information faster can move faster, decide faster, and build faster. The strategic advantage of computation is just as critical today as it was during World War II.
And that brings us to the ultimate irony, a beautiful paradox to take away from this explainer. The machine built to process secret information became the machine that opened information to almost everyone. It is truly remarkable. So I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought. How will this incredible technology, born out of the darkest days of war, but evolved to connect the entire human race, shape our next great chapter in the age of artificial intelligence?